A few years ago, I started showing the Giant bike lineup when it fully came out at the end of this summer, and it seemed to be pretty helpful for a lot of riders out there. And so I'm going to make another one focusing on the 2019 bikes. Now, I will not be going over all the Giant bikes, mainly the ones that go on dirt. And even those, I won't be showing all of them because I want to focus on the higher end, the performance ones. Now, I've had a really good relationship with my local bike shop, who's a Giant dealer, so I've spent a lot of time on a lot of different Giant bikes. So I'm just going to use my experience and give my feedback on the 2019 lineup. In my opinion, Giant have had a couple holes in their bike lineup, and that is the lack of a gravel bike and the lack of a 29er trail bike. They've added those this year, so I think this is actually one of the best lineups that they've come out with. So let's take a look. The first bikes I'll take a look at really quickly are the CYCLOCROSS bikes, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on these because Giant have really not made a lot of changes. So they've got the TCX Advance Pro, which is their top-end bike. There's two models there. And the TCX Advance, which I think is the same frame, it's just a little lower-end component spec, and then their aluminum version. So SRAM is the only game in town for one-by systems for cross out of the box. Now you can run Shimano, but Shimano does not make a one-by crankset for their road stuff, and so all of these come with SRAM. So this is going to have SRAM Force, and it's, like I said, it's a 1-by with 11 speed. I actually have this bike. This will be my cyclocross race bike. The only change they've made is they put on Maxxis all-terrain tires, which they had I think the Schwalbe X1s last year, I believe, but this year they've just changed the tires. They are carbon rims, and I find it funny that Giant does not list on here that these are carbon rims, but the CXR1 wheel system is a carbon wheel set. Awesome cross bike. Giant runs a higher bottom bracket than a lot of other cyclocross bikes, and that makes for a bike that is a little tipsy feeling, but you can pedal through corners and hop over stuff without nailing your pedals on the ground. So the Advance Pro 2 is very similar. It's just going to have SRAM Rival instead of SRAM Force. So the Rival crankset's pretty heavy. I have Rival on my gravel bike. I like it a lot. It's just a heavier component group than Force. And the PX2 wheel set, I believe, is aluminum and not carbon. Now, I will mention that all of Giant's bikes come with tubeless tires. My 2019 cross bike came with rim tape already on. It was set up tubeless. No tubes come with Giant bikes anymore. Everything's tubeless. From their really low-end bikes up to their high-end bikes, everything is tubeless. So like I said, the TCX Advance is just going to be a lower component group, lower spec wheels, bars, so Apex 1 drivetrain and brakes as opposed to the higher end. And then this is their aluminum version. If you are wanting to get into cyclocross and you don't want to spend a lot of money, this is probably one of the best values that Giant offers. There's only one model of their aluminum, and it does come with Apex, so it's a lower end component spec, but for $1,500 you're in the cross game, or gravel. I mean, you could use these as gravel bikes. Now, like I said, Giant has an official gravel bike, which is great. Really glad they did that. So that's the cyclocross bike lineup. Now let's go over to cross-country mountain bikes. Actually, you know what? Let's go to gravel since we're in the cross game. So let's look at their new gravel bike. So this is it's called the Revolt. There are 3 models, and their top end one, $3,300. Great value for $3,300. Let's look at what you get here. You basically get Shimano Ultegra 2x system, and then you get now what's funny here is this is the same wheel system that comes on the cyclocross bike, the CXR1, but here they actually spell it out as carbon. I don't know why they don't do that on the gravel bike, I mean on the cyclocross bike, but on the gravel bike they do. So it is a carbon wheel set. Shimano Ultegra is just a great solid group set. I have Ultegra on a look test bike that I have with disc brakes, and it's flawless. I like Shimano brakes a lot, mineral oil instead of DOT fluid. So if I were to get their gravel bike, this would be the one to get. I've said it before, I personally like a 2x system on gravel bikes for the main reason that you don't have a big jump between gears in the back. So the cog is a narrower space. So This the second model down, the Revolt Advanced 1. By the way, both of these are carbon frames. All of them are carbon frames. So it's really cool that Giant has come out of the gate with their gravel bikes in a carbon frame. So they've gone right to carbon. But this is a 1x system. So it's an Apex 1x system. And so it's a simpler system, but because it has a 1x, the rear cassette is going to have a bigger jump between gears. Now, oddly enough, I find that more of an issue on flat ground versus riding in a really hilly area, because you're shifting a lot. On flat ground, you're wanting to just kind of maybe get into one gear and hold it for a certain amount of time, and it's easier to do with a 2x system because, again, you can find the right gear in the back. But if you like a 1x system, that's a good option. Apex is a little bit lower end. Personally, I would like to have Force. I think Force is about on par with Shimano Ultegra. And then finally, the Advanced 2. So you can get into the gravel game for $2,000. Disc brakes. This one comes with the Shimano 105 group. So this is my opinion, but if I were not going to go for the top of the line model gravel bike, this is the one I would get. Shimano 105 is really solid. It's a tubeless tire, tubeless wheels, and this is a great bike. I'm so glad Giant have come out with a gravel bike. So you know what, let's real quick, let's look at the geometry versus the cyclocross bike, because I just want to point out a couple things. And the main thing that I want to point out here is the bottom bracket drop. So the gravel bike has, let's look at it in millimeters. I like millimeters better. So a 70 millimeter bottom bracket drop versus the cyclocross bike. So this one has a 60 millimeter bottom bracket drop versus a 70 on the gravel bike. The bottom bracket drop is simply how far below the rear and front axle. If you were to draw a straight line, how far down below that is the bottom bracket. And that makes for a bike that's just more steady. And at higher speeds, it's a little bit more relaxed. So when you're going on long gravel rides, you're not fighting the geometry as much. So you're just going to be fresher. It's also got a slacker head angle. So that's another geometry number that I really look at. So if you look at the head tube angle, 70.5, basically you're looking at a 1 degree steeper head angle. That doesn't sound like much on paper, but it does make a difference. So it makes for a bike, the gravel bike is going to not go into turns as quick, but be more steady on faster downhills. Cyclocross, you don't hit really high speeds. You might hit 25 at the most, whereas a gravel bike, you could hit 45 on a gravel road coming down a mountain. So again, that's the gravel bike, and like I said, really stoked that Giant have included an official carbon gravel bike in their lineup. It was missing. I'm not going to go too much into these, but if you wanted to get kind of a commuter bike that will also be a good gravel bike, and you don't want to spend a lot of money, and you're going to look at aluminum frame, I think this Tough Road SLR GX is a really great bike. I personally have not ridden one of these, but just looking on paper, looking at the components, this would be a really sweet ride if you're going to do bike touring, so loading it up with bags, panniers, that kind of thing. This has 40C tires, and so I think you could put some even bigger tires on this. So it's got a Tiagra group set, so not real high-end Shimano stuff, but again, if you just wanted to get into gravel riding and you didn't have a carbon frame in your budget, this would be the way to go. So that's it for cross and gravel. Now I'm going to jump over to mountain bikes, and a lot of you who subscribe to my channel ride mountain bikes, and so I'm going to go just over a few of the Anthems. So just in case you don't know, the Anthem Advanced Pro 29 is a carbon front and rear triangle, whereas the Anthem Advanced 29 without the Pro in the name is a carbon front triangle but an aluminum rear triangle. So let's go to the Advanced Pro 29. I'm not even going to look at this $11,500 bike because not very many of us would want to spend that much money on a bike. So I think this would be the deal. If you are a serious racer and you wanted to ride full suspension, which is all I ride now, this is the ticket right here. So for $5,000, you're getting into a bike with SRAM Eagle. So it's the GX Eagle, which I have on my trail bike, super solid. And then you've got the XCR1 wheel system, which I believe is a carbon wheel set. So tubeless. You know, it's got a 780 wide bar, which is pretty wide for cross country. I personally would trim that down to 750 or 760, but you've got a Fox fork on it, and it's a good Fox fork. It's got the Fit 4 damper. This, by the way, does come with a remote lockout on the rear shock. That's probably the only thing I'm not real excited about. I've used a rear lockout on my Niner, RKT9 RDO. I liked it, I used it, but I'm a simplicity kind of guy, and when it comes to maintenance, I like quick air sleeve maintenance on my bikes, and so I personally would not want a lockout, but it's kind of neither here nor there. If I had it, I would definitely use it. So that's the Advance Pro 29. Now let's just real quick take a peek at the regular Advance 29. So again, aluminum rear triangle, only one model, but for $3,900, you've got a really sweet cross-country bike with a Fox fork. Now what's nice about this, actually, I like Shimano SLX. It's not that far off from Shimano XT. This does come with an XT rear derailleur. SLX is good stuff. I've used it a lot. It's not quite as positive in the shifting, meaning the click is not real prominent compared to XT, but you get used to it really quickly. So this is a 1x11. So you're not getting the 1x12 like you get on the Advance Pro, but hey, it works, and unless you live in an environment where it's really steep, a 1x11 is going to be fine. I've used that on a trail bike and had no problems with it. So XCR wheel system, again, I believe this is a carbon wheel set. Don't quote me on that. We may take a look at their wheel sets later on. In fact, let's do that. Let's just go over, take a peek at their wheel sets. Okay, so looking at their wheel sets, the XCR1 is a carbon wheel set. Pretty good wheel set. I've ridden these before. Like the Tough Cycle wheels that I've been testing, they're really lively. They're not quite as compliant as a Stans wheel set, but it is a pretty good wheel system that comes on these bikes. So that's the Advance 29-1. This to me is probably the best value in the Anthem lineup. If I was on a tight budget but still had enough for a $3,900 mountain bike. I remember back in the day when I first started mountain biking, $1,000 bought you the top of the line mountain bike. But hey, I think this is a great value. And then if you wanted to get into aluminum, you know, I've ridden giant Anthem aluminum bikes in the past, and they're great. They're not quite as light, not quite as stiff as the carbon, but they work really well. And so they have one model in their aluminum Anthem, and it comes with NX Eagle. So this is kind of a new component group from SRAM. It's their lowest end Eagle. So GX used to be the lowest end. They've come down one more, so even a better value, lower price point. You do get aluminum wheels on this bike, and like I said, the NX Eagle. So you're definitely going to have a heavier bike. Again, not quite as stiff, but hey, it's got a Fox fork, Fox rear shock, no rear lockout. This is another great value. So some really good choices for cross-country full suspension. Now let's go over to the trail bikes, my favorite category of bikes. There's two categories of trail bikes that Giant has, the XC Trail and the Trail. I personally like Trail. The XC Trail is basically what used to be the Anthem 27.5. Now they've put a longer fork and I think a little bit more rear travel and a dropper post. So this is a bike that's it's a 27.5. It's going to be really fast for a trail bike, just not quite as capable on the descents as the full-on trail bike. But it's a good option if you know, a cross-country bike is is not enough travel for you, and a full-on trail bike is a little bit too slow and sluggish for the area that you ride the most, this is a great option. So if you look at the fork, it's got a 130 fork and a pretty good component group, NX Eagle, Fox, like I said, Fox fork. So this is a decent bike. The tires are 2.3 for this bike, and so that's a good tire width for this kind of XC trail bike. So I'm not going to go too much into these, but it's like I said, it's a really good option if you're wanting to find kind of middle of the road between cross country and trail. Now let's go to my favorite category of bikes, which is a full-on trail bike. I'll filter this for the 2019 ones. So you'll see the XTC Plus, and I didn't talk about it, but this was also in the lineup for cross country, which I may at the end of the video just go back and look at some hardtail cross country bikes. They categorize this as a trail and a cross country bike, which is kind of cool because the XTC is a pretty versatile bike, especially the Plus version. You've got the Fathom, so that's their kind of lower end hardtail, which is still way above a Walmart bike, you know, not a super expensive bike. So this is kind of what I would recommend for an entry-level bike, whether you're doing cross country or trail. It's a great bike to get into the game of mountain biking. Okay, so let's look at the Trance series, and so this is where I really like the Trance bikes. And let's look at the regular Trance. And so last year when I reviewed the Trance, I have a Trance. I said the only thing that I might change on the Trance is I would put a 36 fork on it instead of the 34, and I guess Giant watched my video and listened because they put a 36. It's really the only change they've made for 2019 versus 2018. Everything else is the same. So this Trance Advance has a carbon front, aluminum rear triangle, and it's GX Eagle. So I pretty much have this bike except for mine has a 34 fork. This is a carbon wheel set, by the way. Again, it comes tubeless. Maxxis high rollers are decent tires. I actually swapped these out for 2.6 Swabies. The high rollers are a good tire. It's a really good tire for hooking up on the descents. It's a little slow all around, but it's still a great tire. And so they put a 2.5 this year on the front and a 2.4 in the back. So they've actually increased the tire size a little bit. But the nice thing about the Trance line is you can put a 2.6. Personally, I think 2.6 is the sweet spot for a burly trail bike. Plus to me is a little bit too slow and heavy. What's interesting, this is just a side note, is I've seen less Plus bikes this year in lineups like Specialized, Giant, and some other ones. So I think Plus bikes may be fading out a little bit. I think people may be realizing that a 2.5, 2.6 27.5 tire is kind of the sweet spot, and I actually would agree with that. I said that a year or two ago when I was reviewing a Trance, and I think we're seeing that in the bike industry. And then the Advance 2, which is going to have a Rock Shocks, I think. Nope, it's got a Fox. Sweet. Just a lower end component. So NX Eagle, and this is a great value. If you're looking for a high-end trail bike on a budget, you're not going to find too many bikes for less than $4,200. So this is a great value. Now you've got options with the trail bike from Giant. You've got 29 or 27.5. I hope to get my hands on the 29 version pretty soon. And what's nice too is Giant have come out with not just the carbon but also aluminum. A lot of you, like me, may be looking at this on paper and asking yourself, is 115 millimeters of rear travel enough? I've read some reviews, and so far they're coming out really positive. So you see here, the rear only has 115 millimeters of travel. So this is not a long travel trail bike, this is a medium travel because it is a 29, so you can get away with a little bit less travel in the rear and 130 up front. You know, just on paper, personally, I would like to have seen a little bit more travel, but I don't want to judge yet until I ride this thing because a lot of people are coming back from test rides and saying they feel like this bike has more travel than it shows on paper. Again, hope to get my hands on one and do a review pretty soon. But GX Eagle for this one, this is the Advance Pro 29.1. I don't even look at the real expensive bikes because it's just out of the league for a lot of riders out there. $8,000 for a trail bike. But this has the Fox Performance. So it's got the grip damper, so it's not the higher end Fit 4 damper, but I've used this fork and I honestly didn't notice a big difference between the Fit 4 and the grip. I like the grip damper. It's a great option. 34 fork. So again, this is a mid-travel trail bike. What's interesting though is it does have a piggyback reservoir shock. So if you look at the shock here, it's the DPX2, which has the piggyback reservoirs, so that's made for a little bit burlier trails. So man, I'm excited about trying this bike. The tires, by the way, are pretty thick for a 29 tire, so 2.3s. 2.6 may be a little bit heavy for people out there who want just a faster all-around bike. 2.6 is awesome on the downhills, but you do feel it on the uphill. So, you know, for the spec, this is a sweet bike at $5,000. Now, like I said, there is an aluminum version of the bike, and let's go back out and take a look at it. So the Trance 29, $3,000. You get a Fox fork. I think it's the same fork, so it's got the grip damper. It's just aluminum, and it has NX Eagle instead of GX like we just saw on the carbon bike. And if you wanted to see what a 29er trail bike was like without breaking the bank, this could be it. I think Giant have really nailed their lineup this year. It's just a really all-around lineup. The stance. So I've actually never ridden a stance, but everything I see on paper tells me this would be a great entry-level trail bike for a lot of riders out there. So you're looking at aluminum frame. You've got Shimano Deore, which is not the lightest Shimano group set, but it's a really solid group set. You've got a RockShox shock on it and a RockShox fork. I'm a fan of Fox, but RockShox works. This is a great bike if you just wanted to get a full suspension bike and you know you're really on a tight budget. This is probably the lowest you're going to see a real mountain bike, full suspension mountain bike. So this again is a good option for a lot of riders out there. Let's take a look now at the enduro bikes. I'm not going to go into downhill, so I've got to limit this video as short as I can get it. And I'm not going to go into downhill. So the Rain, if you're racing enduro, this is your bike. I watched a video that compared 3 top-end coil shock enduro bikes, and the Giant came out on top. I may even link that video below because I thought it was a really well done video. So you've got the Rain Advance, which is their carbon bike. The Rain, I've owned a Rain years ago, but it has shorter travel. It's like 150 millimeters of travel. So the Advance one is going to have GX Eagle. And you know you've got the DVO fork, which I've never used a DVO fork or shock, but I'm hearing really good things about it, and it seems like it's tuned extremely well, especially for enduro riding. If you're looking at an enduro bike, you know what you're looking for usually, and so enduro bikes, you can pedal them uphill, but they're made for coming downhill. So this is probably the longest travel bike that you would want to get if you still pedal to the top and don't take a shuttle. You can definitely shuttle with this bike. This would be a good park bike and a good enduro race bike. You know, $4,400, you've got really good specs. I haven't talked much yet about the dropper seat posts. So Giant will put on their own dropper seat posts. I have it on my trail bike. You know, I've only had one problem with a Giant dropper post over the years. Giant warrantied it. And so the seat post, you know, it's the Contact Switch S. It works very well. So you're going to see that on their trail bikes and their enduro bikes. And let's just real quick take a look at the aluminum Rain, which there's nothing wrong with aluminum, folks. If you're racing enduro and you want to, you know, get a bike that's a real enduro race bike, and you know you only want to spend $2,600, this would be a great bike. It's got Shimano Deore, and you know, like I said before, aluminum's not going to be as light as carbon, but it's still stiff enough for racing. And I actually, you know, when I did my test of mid versus high trail bike, I said that the aluminum rims on the mid-price trail bike were actually more compliant, a little bit more forgiving than the carbon. Not quite as playful and stiff, but still they absorb bumps really well. All right, so the last thing that I want to do, I said I would go back and look at some of the hardtail cross-country bikes. And so like I've said before, Giant also puts the XTC Advance Plus in the cross-country lineup, so that's in the trail and cross-country. And then the Advance 29 they only list in the cross-country section. And so this would be your choice if you want to race cross-country and you want to race a hardtail. So you've got a couple options. It's RockShox Sport, and you're going to find it on both of these. But on the $4,000 level bike, you've got GX Eagle. So it's a 1x12, perfect component group for cross-country racing if you're not wanting to go all out and get like Shimano XTR. But you're still seeing a ton of SRAM out there. I think next year it's going to change. Shimano has really upped the game with their 1x12 system, but it's not really coming out until this fall, so you're not going to see it on the 2019 bike lineups of any manufacturer unless they just put out a model kind of in the spring. But we'll see. But I'm curious to see what a Shimano 1x12 system rides like. But again, it's SRAM for all the bikes coming out right now. I think I mentioned the Fathom. This again is a great bike for getting into the game. You know, this is a good 29er to get you out on the trails. Like I said, it's way better than a Walmart bike. So about $1,000 is as low as you want to go to get into mountain biking for a new bike. That's going to wrap it up. I know there's a lot of other bikes out there, road and recreational, but that's all I want to do for this video. It's gotten really long and I don't want to make it any longer. So let me know in the comments below, what do you think about the 2019 lineup? Have you gotten your hands on one? Which one, and do you like it? Thanks for watching.